even though you locked all your doors. That means that if you are sitting there at a red light on your way to work, and you're sitting there at a red light, just minding your own business, waiting for the light to turn green, and then someone rear-ends you, crashes right in the back of your car, out of the blue, that you are responsible for that. That means that if you invested some money in the stock market, and the stock market crashed, if the whole economy collapsed, you're responsible for that. This is a little bit radical. And you might say, well, Leo, why would I take responsibility for that kind of stuff? I mean, that stuff's not in my control, is it? And I'll get to that in a second. But you need to start taking responsibility for even the stuff that is seemingly out of your control. Because the bottom line here is that what is in your control is how you're responding to the situation in the present moment. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in a second. The fifth area, area number 5, is circumstances. So the circumstances of your life. What do the circumstances mean? The circumstances mean stuff like the family that you grew up in. That's a circumstance of life. The country that you live in now, that's a circumstance of life. How about the genetics that you had when you were born? That's a circumstance of life. How about the amount of money that you have now in your bank account? Or the political system that's in power in your country? These are all circumstances. And most people really like to use circumstances as reasons for why they can't do what they want in their life, why they can't create what they want in their life. But this is where we nip this in the butt. It's right here by saying that you take responsibility 100% for all the circumstances too. Accidents and circumstances. And lastly, the 6th point is relationships. This is a very huge area. A lot of people are miserable in their lives because of the low quality of the relationships that they have, whether with friends, bosses, spouses, girlfriends and boyfriends, or whoever else, family, all of that stuff. And the reason that's happening is because how much do we like to point the finger at the other person when something's not going right in a relationship? Almost every time, right? Almost every time we do that. And that's a huge problem. Every single relationship that's making you feel frustrated, making you feel bad, you're completely responsible for that feeling, and you're completely responsible for the dynamic that's going on between you and that other person. So these are the 6 areas. If you take responsibility for all of these, plus anything that's left out by these 6 areas, so anything that's left over, you have to take responsibility for that too. If you cover all of that, then you're going to be good. That's going to set the foundation that you need to really do the personal development work that you want to do to create the kind of life that you want to have. Now, if you refuse to take responsibility here, then you're going to experience a lot of suffering and bad results. What I want to do is I want to show you a model. A model of the possibilities that you have within personal development. See, I see a lot of people in life, what happens is that they're born, they go through their early childhood years, then they get into their teens, they go through school, then they get into college, and during that time, they have a pretty natural upward growth like this in their life. Upward growth of progress, personal development is just pretty natural. Then, after about 21, what tends to happen is that natural growth starts to plateau, starts to level out, and it plateaus. And for a lot of people, that plateau just keeps going and going and going and going for decade after decade after decade until they're dead. And that's not even the worst case scenario. I see a lot of people, what happens with them is not only does it just plateau, but their personal development and their results in life, they actually start to decay after 21. So it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. For me personally, my expectation is always, at least what I want to have in my life, is a linear upward growth like this, right? From the year that I was born to the year that I'm going to be dead, I want it to be like this, a straight upward slope like that. And that's kind of what you would expect life would be like, right? You're growing, and you just keep growing. But see, that doesn't work out that way for most people. Because once they get out of school, and once they get out of the family situation, they just kind of get stuck in life because a lot of those mindsets, a lot of that conditioning just kind of gels and congeals and basically hardens, and then that is the trajectory that then they carry throughout their whole life. For me, that's a very, very sad thing. I would hate to live a life like that, and I hate to see people, and I see a lot of people who live those kinds of lives that are plateaued or decaying. And actually, over the last 5 years, if I really think about it, then my progress, it hasn't just been a linear growth, it's been an exponential. So, exponential growth. Because every year, I'm building up myself with new mindsets, new techniques, new ways to think about the world, going out and taking lots of action, generating the results that I want to generate, and then those inspire me even more, those motivate me even more, those empower me, literally empower me, because I'm creating tools that then allow me to have new capabilities. And so what happens is that I experience exponential growth, and to me that's like, that's what I want out of life, is I want exponential growth. It feels so amazing. I want that for me, and I want that for you guys. So let me show you the model. This is kind of the model that you could go through if you really wanted to, if you really took the personal development stuff seriously. So at this end of the spectrum, we've got a spectrum here. At this end, we've got victims. We've also got at this end low consciousness or total unconsciousness. At this end of the spectrum, we have high consciousness or maximum possible consciousness for you as a human being. And then we've got various degrees of consciousness along this spectrum and various stages of life, various stages of personal development. So I want to cover 4 stages. Stage number 1 is victim thinking. A victim believes that they don't have much control in life. And what the victim often feels is a sense of frustration and a sense of apathy. A victim doesn't even want to start taking action because they believe that they don't have the ability to succeed. They believe that there are obstacles and roadblocks that are insurmountable, that it's simply impossible, and that they can't do it. And so this is where they are. The problem is that a victim is doing all this unconsciously. He doesn't really understand what's going on here. He's not even making the choice to be a victim. It's being almost made for him by default. But nevertheless, this choice is being made, and it's very, very crippling. And what's most scary about it is that a lot of times people just don't see that they're doing it. So if that's lowest possible consciousness, then what's one step up from that? If you get a little bit more consciousness and you evolve from a victim, where do you go? You go to stage number 2. And this is what I call the fighter. This is the victim, this is the fighter. What's the fighter all about? The fighter is all about conflict. It's conflict energy. It's this idea that we live in a dog-eat-dog world. The world is harsh. Reality is harsh. I need to fight for my survival. I need to fight to protect my family. Always, always needing to fight, needing to compete. It's believing that life is a zero-sum game, and that if I win, then somebody else has to lose. And if somebody else wins, then I have to lose. And so there's this constant tug of war, or this constant clashing. That's conflict energy. You probably know people like this. People who are angry a lot. People who are combative. People who really get in your face. People who get very easily frustrated with life. Feel like they have to go out there and slave themselves in order to succeed. Slave themselves in order to be happy. Well, that is a fighter. And although a lot of this fighting energy, this conflict energy, can be very nasty, very unpleasant, especially if you have friends like that or family that are very nasty to be around people.